The massive Station Beta 7 hummed with activity as thousands of beings from across the galaxy went about their daily business. Cargo ships docked and departed every few minutes, their engines creating a constant low rumble that echoed through the metal corridors. Among the crowds of blue-skinned Valerians, towering insectoid Zephyrians and crystalline Nexari, two humans walked quietly toward the judicial complex. G1 adjusted her simple trader's jacket as she entered the imposing courthouse. The building's walls were lined with holographic displays, showing the Galactic Trade Consortium's laws in dozens of alien languages. Her companion Dongwu stayed close behind, his weathered face showing concern as they approached the reception desk, manned by a multi-armed Valerian clerk. "Human trader G1 Park reporting for scheduled hearing," she said calmly to the clerk, who barely looked up from his datapad before pointing toward a waiting area filled with uncomfortable metal benches. They sat among other defendants, mostly humans and a few other species considered lesser by the consortium. G1 noticed how the Valerian and Nexari defendants were called first, despite arriving later. When her name was finally announced through the translation speakers, nearly 2 hours had passed. The courtroom was sterile and cold, designed to intimidate rather than comfort. Judicial Arbiter Kang Ho sat behind an elevated platform, his pale blue skin gleaming under the harsh lights. His black robes marked with the consortium's silver emblem made him look even more imposing. 2 robotic sentries flanked his bench, their red optical sensors scanning the room constantly. Case number 7749 Beta, Consortium versus Human Trader G1 Park, the court's AI announced in its monotone voice. Charges: violation of Interstellar Noise Ordinance 347B, disturbance of station peace protocols. Kang Ho's 6 fingers drummed impatiently on his desk as he reviewed the digital case file floating before him. His large, dark eyes showed nothing but annoyance as he looked down at G1. "Human, you are accused of creating excessive noise disturbance. In Docking Bay 12 yesterday at 14:30 station time, station security recorded sound levels exceeding permitted limits by 23 decibels. How do you respond?" G1 stood straight, her voice clear and respectful. "Your Honor, I was simply singing while working on my ship's cargo systems. The sound was not intentional noise, but rather singing," Kang Ho interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Humans and their primitive vocal expressions. You people seem to think the entire galaxy wants to hear your meaningless sounds." Dongwu's hands clenched into fists, but G1 placed a gentle hand on his arm without turning around. She continued, speaking calmly. "Your Honor, the song had cultural significance and was meant to help coordinate the loading process. Many species use vocal patterns for silence." Kang Ho's voice boomed through the courtroom. "I have heard enough human excuses today. Your species consistently shows disregard for civilized society's rules. You come to our stations, ignore our customs, and expect special treatment." The judge's assistant, a nervous-looking Valerian named Taemin, whispered something in his ear, but Kang Ho waved him away dismissively. "The evidence is clear," the judge continued, his voice growing more irritated. "Security footage shows you producing sounds that exceeded legal limits, disturbing other traders and station personnel. The fact that you call it singing makes it no less a violation of our laws." G1 tried once more. "Your Honor, if I could explain the context is irrelevant." Kang Ho slammed his gavel, causing the metallic sound to echo through the chamber. "Humans always have excuses. You think because Earth joined the consortium only 50 years ago that you deserve special consideration. Your species must learn to follow the same rules as everyone else." The robotic sentries moved slightly closer as tension filled the room. Other aliens in the gallery whispered among themselves, some nodding in agreement with the judge's harsh words. "The fine for violation of Noise Ordinance 347B is 5,000 galactic credits," Kang Ho announced. "Additionally, I am adding a 2,000 credit penalty for wasting this court's time with frivolous arguments. Total 7,000 credits to be paid immediately." The amount was enormous, enough to buy a small spacecraft or fund a trader's operations for months. Dongwu started to stand, his face red with anger, but G1 gently pressed his shoulder, keeping him seated. Without a word of protest, G1 accessed her credit account through her wrist device, and transferred the full amount. The transaction appeared on the court's display, showing her account balance dropping dramatically. "Payment confirmed," the AI announced. "Case dismissed," Kang Ho said coldly. "Next time, human, remember that your personal habits must conform to civilized standards." Ji-won bowed slightly, a gesture that seemed to surprise some of the aliens present. "Thank you, Your Honor." As they walked out of the courtroom, Dong-woo could barely contain his frustration. "Ji-won, that was completely unfair. You could have—" "Peace, my friend," she said softly, her voice carrying a strange quality that seemed to calm everyone within hearing distance. "Sometimes the greatest victories come from unexpected defeats." Neither of them noticed Tae-min hurrying after them with urgent news that would change everything. The morning shift at Galactic News Network's headquarters on Nexus Prime buzzed with its usual controlled chaos. Holographic displays flickered with breaking stories from across the galaxy, while reporters from dozens of species worked at their stations. In the center of it all, veteran news anchor Hye-jin sat at her curved desk, her professional demeanor hiding the excitement she felt about her lead story. "Good morning, Galaxy," she began, her voice carrying to billions of viewers across thousands of worlds through quantum communication networks. "I'm Hye-jin Park with GNN Morning Update. We begin today with a shocking story that has sparked outrage from the core worlds to the outer rim." Behind her, massive screens displayed footage of Station Beta 7's courthouse, followed by images of protests erupting on multiple worlds. Alien citizens held signs in various languages, all expressing similar sentiments of anger and disbelief. Yesterday, on Station Beta 7, a human woman was fined 7,000 credits for allegedly violating noise ordinances. The judicial arbiter dismissed her explanations and imposed the maximum penalty, calling humans uncivilized and their customs primitive noise. Hye-jin paused as the screen switched to security footage from the courthouse, showing Ji-won standing calmly before Judge Kang Ho's imposing bench. "What Judge Kang Ho didn't realize," she continued, her voice gaining intensity, "is that he had just insulted and humiliated the most beloved peacemaker in galactic history. The woman he treated as a common criminal is Ji-won Park, known throughout the galaxy as the Harmony Singer." The newsroom fell silent, as even the staff stopped their work to watch. On screens across the galaxy, beings of every species froze in recognition of that name. "For those who may not remember," Hye-jin continued as archival footage began playing, 15 years ago the Centauri system was torn apart by a three-way war between the militant Kraxan Federation, the territorial Vegan Empire, and local human colonies. Millions had died, and diplomatic solutions had failed repeatedly. The footage showed massive space battles, burning planets, and refugee ships fleeing the conflict zone. Viewers watched as enormous dreadnoughts exchanged devastating energy blasts while smaller fighters swarmed around them like angry insects. When all hope seemed lost, a single human woman requested permission to address the three warring factions. Ji-won Park walked alone onto the neutral meeting station, carrying nothing but her voice and an impossible dream of peace. The screen shifted to grainy recordings from that historic day. A simple human woman stood in the center of a vast chamber, surrounded by hostile alien delegations. Kraxan warriors in their ceremonial battle armor sat across from elegant vegan diplomats in flowing robes, while human representatives looked exhausted from months of failed negotiations. "What happened next," Hye-jin said softly, "changed the course of galactic history." The recording showed Ji-won beginning to sing. Her voice started low and gentle, weaving melodies that seemed to speak directly to the soul. As she sang, something remarkable happened. The hostile delegates began to listen, really listen, for the first time in years. Her song contained no words that any translator could process, Hye-jin explained as the footage continued. Instead, it spoke in the universal language of emotion, pain, hope, and shared loss. Hardened Kraxan warriors began to weep. Proud Vegan nobles set aside their ceremonial weapons. Human colonists reached out to former enemies. The historical footage showed the incredible moment when representatives from all three species stood and joined hands, tears streaming down faces both alien and human. The Centauri Accords were signed that very day, Hyejin continued, her own voice thick with emotion. 3 species that had been destroying each other for years suddenly found common ground. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. Meanwhile, across the galaxy on Station Beta 7, Judge Kang Ho was having a very different morning. His aide Tae Min burst into his private chambers, his usually composed demeanor completely shattered. Your Honor, you must see this. Tae Min's hands shook as he activated the wall display, switching it to GNN's broadcast. Kang Ho looked up from his morning reports with annoyance. Tae Min, I told you not to disturb me unless... His words died in his throat as he saw Ji-won's face filling the massive screen. But this wasn't the simple trader from yesterday's hearing. This was archival footage showing her standing before the Galactic Council, receiving the Order of Universal Peace, the highest honor any being could achieve. Since that day, Hyejin's voice continued from the speakers, Ji-won Park has been revered by countless species. The Zephyrian hives consider her songs sacred hymns. The crystalline Nexari have carved her melodies into their memory crystals to preserve them for eternity. Even the warrior clans of distant Arcturus pray to her, name before battle, seeking the strength to choose peace over violence. Kang Ho's blue skin had turned pale white as the full scope of his mistake became clear. On screen, the news showed footage of Ji-won quietly paying her fine and leaving his courtroom with dignity intact. Yesterday, Hyejin said, her professional, mask slipping to show genuine anger. This woman, this living symbol of peace and understanding, was treated like a common criminal by a judge who couldn't be bothered to learn who she was. The broadcast cut to reactions from across the galaxy. On the Kraxon homeworld, massive warriors roared in fury. In the elegant spires of the Vegan capital, nobles called for immediate action. Human colonies everywhere held vigils of support. The Galactic Trade Consortium has yet to respond to requests for comment, Hyejin concluded, but as protests continue to grow on dozens of worlds, one thing is clear. The galaxy has not forgotten what Ji-won Park did for all of us, and they will not forgive how she was treated. As the broadcast ended, Kang Ho sat in stunned silence. His prestigious career, his reputation, his entire future, all of it was crumbling because he had been too arrogant to recognize greatness when it stood before him. The communicator on his desk began chiming with incoming calls from consortium, leadership, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. Outside his window, he could already see protest ships beginning to gather around the station. The first ship arrived within hours of the broadcast. The sleek Nexari crystal vessel emerged from hyperspace with a flash of brilliant light, its transparent hull reflecting Station Beta 7's rotating sections like a prism. Captain Minho watched from the station's command center as his sensors detected the approaching craft. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Nexari vessel, his communications officer reported nervously. Before Minho could respond, the massive view screen flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Su Young of the Nexari Collective. Her crystalline features sparkled with controlled anger as she spoke in perfect galactic standard. Station Beta 7, this is Ambassador Su Young. I demand immediate docking privileges and a formal meeting with your judicial authority. The Nexari Collective will not tolerate the disgraceful treatment of the Harmony Singer. Minho had been dreading this moment since watching the morning news. Ambassador, we welcome diplomatic vessels, but I must ask for patience while we... Patience? Su Young's voice cut through his words like laser fire. Your judge showed no patience when he humiliated the woman who brought peace to our galaxy. Dock us immediately, or we will consider this station hostile to Nexari interests. As her ship moved toward Docking Bay 1, 3 more vessels dropped out of hyperspace. The massive Kraxon battlecruiser Honor's Edge appeared first, its dark hull bristling with weapons that remained thankfully powered down. Behind it came an elegant Vegan diplomatic ship, its golden hull gleaming like liquid metal. The third ship made everyone on the bridge gasp. A Zephyrian hive vessel, looking like a living organism with its organic curves and bioluminescent markings. Captain, the sensor operator called out, his voice shaking. I'm reading 17 more ships approaching from different vectors, multiple species, including some I don't recognize. Within 6 hours, Station Beta 7 found itself surrounded by the largest gathering of alien vessels in its history. Ships from dozens of species formed a protective ring around the station, their varied designs creating a spectacular but intimidating display. Some were technological marvels of metal and energy. Others appeared grown rather than built, and a few seemed to exist partially in other dimensions. Down in the judicial complex, Judge Kang Ho's day had become a nightmare. His personal communicator hadn't stopped chiming with urgent messages from consortium headquarters. Directors, sector governors, and high-ranking officials all demanded explanations for what the media was calling the Beta 7 incident. Tae-min entered his chambers carrying a data pad filled with protest registrations. Your Honor, we've received formal complaints from 47 different species. The Zephyrian hive mind has declared you enemy of the sacred harmony. The Arcturus war clans are demanding ritual combat to restore the Harmony Singer's honor. Kang Ho's hands trembled as he read the reports. This is impossible. It was a simple noise violation case. How could one human cause all this chaos? She's not just any human, sir, Tae-min said quietly. I tried to tell you yesterday, but you wouldn't listen. Ji-won Park saved millions of lives. Her songs are played at peace ceremonies across the galaxy. Some species consider her voice a gift from their gods. Outside the courthouse, the situation was growing more tense by the hour. What started as a few dozen protesters had grown into thousands. Beings from every corner of the galaxy held vigil. In the station's main plaza, their diverse forms creating a living rainbow of solidarity. Kraxan warriors stood shoulder to shoulder with delicate Nexari crystals. Towering vegan nobles shared space with tiny microspecies who rode on their shoulders. Even the usually isolated deep space wanderers had sent representatives, their energy forms flickering like living stars among the crowd. They sang, or at least their species' equivalent of singing. The Kraxans produced deep rumbling war chants that spoke of honor betrayed. The Zephyrians created complex harmonic patterns with their wing beats. The Nexari rang like crystal bells, their bodies resonating with pure tones. Together they created a symphony of anger and support that echoed through the station's corridors. Station Security Chief Won Jin watched the crowds through his monitoring systems, sweat beading on his forehead. Captain, my officers are requesting backup. The protesters aren't violent, but there are so many of them we can barely maintain order. Min-ho nodded grimly. How many are we talking about? Over 15,000, sir, and more arriving every hour. They've completely filled the main plaza and are starting to occupy the secondary areas. Some are camping in their ships and taking shifts. Ambassador Su Young led a delegation of 12 species representatives through the station's corridors toward the judicial complex. Their diverse forms created an impressive procession, towering Kraxans in ceremonial armor, graceful vegans in flowing diplomatic robes, crystalline Nexari that chimed softly with each step, and others whose appearances defied easy description. Station personnel pressed themselves against the walls as the group passed, whispering among themselves about the historic nature of the moment. Never before had so many species united for a single cause. The consortium built this organization on principles of fair treatment and mutual respect, Su Young announced as they walked. When those principles are violated, we all suffer. Ji-won Park represents the best of what our galaxy can achieve together. Behind them, the crowd continued to grow. Ships kept arriving from distant systems, their passengers adding their voices to the protest. The station's docking facilities were pushed beyond capacity, forcing newer arrivals to maintain holding patterns in space. On the command deck, Captain Min-ho received an urgent transmission from consortium headquarters. Director Kyung-soo's face appeared on screen, his expression grave. Captain, you need to resolve this situation immediately. Half the galaxy is watching Beta 7 right now. Stock prices are falling, trade routes are being disrupted, and 3 major species are threatening to withdraw from consortium membership over this judge's actions. Sir, what are your orders? Do whatever it takes to fix this. The judge's career is over. Make that clear to him. But more importantly, we need to show the galaxy that the consortium respects G1 Park and everything she represents. As if to emphasize his words, another wave of ships appeared on the sensors, including several massive vessels carrying entire diplomatic delegations from the core worlds. The fallout from Judge Kang Ho's mistake was spreading across the galaxy, like wildfire, and Station Beta 7 had become the center of the biggest diplomatic crisis in decades. Judge Kang Ho's hands shook as he walked through the crowded corridors of Station Beta 7. The protests had been going on for 3 days, and the pressure from consortium leadership was becoming unbearable. Every news channel in the galaxy was covering the story, and his name had become synonymous with prejudice and arrogance. His aide Tai Min struggled to keep up as they made their way toward Docking Bay 12, where intelligence reports indicated G1 was staying aboard her modest cargo ship. The crowds of protesters parted reluctantly as station security cleared a path, but their angry stares followed the disgraced judge every step of the way. "Your Honor," Taemin whispered nervously, "perhaps we should wait for the diplomatic protocols to be arranged. The ambassadors are demanding formal proceedings." "No," Kang Ho replied firmly. "I need to speak with her directly before this gets any worse. The consortium directors made it clear. Fix this or face complete disgrace." As they approached the docking bay, the scene became even more surreal. Alien delegations had set up temporary camps throughout the area. Kraxan warriors meditated in formation, while their massive battle armor gleamed under the artificial lights. Nexari crystals hummed softly in harmony, creating beautiful light patterns that danced across the walls. Zephyrian hive drones flew in precise formations overhead, their bioluminescent wings creating moving constellations. At the center of it all sat a simple human cargo vessel called Peaceful Journey. It looked completely ordinary compared to the exotic alien ships surrounding it, but everyone treated it like the most important vessel in the galaxy. G1 emerged from her ship just as Kang Ho arrived. She wore the same simple trader's clothing from 3 days ago, but somehow she seemed to radiate a calm authority that made even the towering Kraxan warriors step back respectfully. Her companion Dongwu followed close behind, his weathered face showing concern as he noticed the approaching delegation. "Miss Park," Kang Ho began, his voice cracking slightly, I have come to apologize for my terrible mistake." The entire docking bay fell silent. Thousands of alien beings stopped their activities to watch this historic moment. Even the station's background humming seemed to quiet, as if the machinery itself was paying attention. G1 studied the judge's face for a long moment before speaking. "Judge Kang Ho, I appreciate you coming here personally. That took courage." Her words were gentle, but somehow they made Kang Ho feel even worse. He had expected anger, demands for revenge, threats of political retaliation. Instead, he found the same calm dignity she had shown in his courtroom. "I had no idea who you were," he continued desperately. "If I had known about your service to the galaxy, your role in ending the Centauri War." "But that's exactly the problem," G1 interrupted softly, her voice carrying clearly through the silent bay. "You didn't treat me badly because you didn't know who I was. You treated me badly because I was human." The crowd stirred uneasily. Several alien delegates nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable at the direct accusation. "Your Honor," G1 continued, "in the past month alone, I've witnessed human merchants being charged higher docking fees than other species, human students being denied admission to galactic universities despite superior qualifications, and human diplomats being seated at the back of important meetings. This isn't about one judge's mistake. It's about a pattern of discrimination that affects my entire species." Ambassador Su Young stepped forward from the crowd. "The Harmony Singer speaks truth. The Nexari have observed these injustices, but failed to address them adequately." A massive Kraxan warrior named Bakjin added his voice. "Our clans have noted the disrespect shown to humans. We assumed it was normal galactic politics, but perhaps we were wrong." Kang Ho felt the weight of their stares, realizing that his personal crisis had exposed a much larger problem. "Miss Park, how can we make this right? What can the consortium do to address these issues?" "Change doesn't come from apologies alone," G1 replied. "It comes from understanding and action." You fined me for singing while working, calling it primitive noise. But you never asked why I was singing or what it meant. She gestured to the diverse crowd around them. Every species here has their own ways of expressing joy, coordinating, work or finding peace. The Zephyrians use wing patterns, the Nexari create light symphonies, the Kraxons perform ritual chants. Yet somehow, when humans sing, it's considered disruptive. Dongwu stepped forward, his expression serious. Judge Kang Ho, there's something else you should know. My name is Admiral Dongwu of Earth's Deep Space Fleet. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. Even the normally composed alien ambassadors showed surprise at this announcement. Admiral, Kang Ho stammered, but you were dressed as a simple trader. Because we needed to understand how humans are really treated when we don't have titles or uniforms to protect us, Dongwu explained. For the past 6 months, Ji-won and I have been traveling the galaxy in disguise, documenting discrimination against our people. He activated a holographic display from his wrist device, showing dozens of recorded incidents. Security footage revealed human merchants being harassed, human students being ignored by professors, human workers being paid less than their alien counterparts for identical jobs. We weren't just trading cargo, Dongwu continued. We were gathering evidence for Earth's upcoming petition to the Galactic Council about systematic discrimination against humanity. The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs as aliens processed this information. Several delegates began urgent conversations with their assistants, clearly recognizing the political implications. Your courtroom incident, Ji-won said to Kang Ho, was just the most public example of something that happens to humans every day. The difference is that this time the galaxy was watching. A young vegan diplomat named Sung-min stepped forward nervously. Harmony Singer, if Earth presents this evidence to the Council, it could trigger major reforms across all consortium. Space. That's exactly what we hope will happen, Ji-won replied. But reform requires more than just changing laws. It requires changing hearts and minds. She turned back to Judge Kang Ho, who now understood that his mistake had become part of something much larger than a simple court case. Your Honor, she said gently, you have a choice. You can let this destroy your career, or you can use your position to help create the changes our galaxy needs. The protests outside aren't really about me. They're about justice, equality, and treating all beings with dignity regardless of their species. Kang Ho looked around at the thousands of faces watching him, alien and human alike, all waiting to see what he would do next. The confrontation had become something nobody expected, not just an apology, but a moment that could reshape how the entire galaxy viewed humanity and justice itself. 6 months after the Beta 7 incident, the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime had never seen such a diverse gathering. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive amphitheater, their varied forms creating a spectacular display of galactic unity. At the center podium, Ji-won stood calmly as she prepared to address the most important legislative session in decades. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. Today we vote not just on the Human Equality Act, but on the future of our entire galactic community. In the observation gallery, Admiral Dongwu watched with pride as his longtime friend addressed the galaxy's most powerful beings. Beside him sat an unexpected figure, former Judge Kang Ho, now serving as the consortium's special advocate for species equality. The transformation had been remarkable. After their confrontation on Station Beta 7, Kang Ho had thrown himself into understanding human contributions to galactic society. He studied the Centauri Peace Accords, interviewed human scientists working on breakthrough technologies, and even visited Earth to see humanity's home planet firsthand. The evidence is overwhelming, Kang Ho had testified earlier that day. Humans have been systematically undervalued and discriminated against throughout consortium space. As someone who participated in this injustice, I feel obligated to help correct it. The proposed reforms were comprehensive. The Human Equality Act would establish equal treatment protocols across all consortium facilities, create oversight committees to monitor discrimination, and most importantly, recognize human cultural practices as valid expressions worthy of protection. On the massive display screens surrounding the chamber, Real-time voting results appeared as each delegation cast their decision. The Nexari Collective voted unanimously in favor. The Kraxan Federation's warriors had declared support for honorable treatment of the peace-bringers. Even traditionally conservative species were backing the reforms, but the real change was happening beyond the political chambers. Across the galaxy, the Beta 7 movement had inspired beings of all species to examine their own prejudices and assumptions. On the mining world of Kepler 7, human and Zephyrian workers had formed joint labor unions after realizing they faced similar discrimination from corporate management. Their combined strike had forced major mining companies to implement fair wage policies for all species. In the academic centers of Alpha Centauri, universities were actively recruiting human professors and students after discovering they had been unconsciously biasing their admission processes toward certain species. Dr. Youngsu, a human xenobiologist, had just been appointed as the first non-Nexari director of the Galactic Institute of Sciences. The entertainment industry was experiencing its own revolution. Human musicians, previously dismissed as primitive noisemakers, were now collaborating with alien artists to create entirely new forms of galactic music. The hit song Harmony Across Stars featured G1's vocals combined with Kraxan battle drums, Nexari crystal resonance, and Zephyrian wingbeat rhythms. On the trade routes, human merchants were finding new respect and opportunities. Captain Tyonji, who had struggled for years to get fair contracts, now commanded one of the most successful interspecies trading fleets in the galaxy. Her crew included beings from 12 different worlds, all working together as equals. The military had seen changes too. Admiral Dongwu's revelation about his undercover mission had prompted the Consortium Defense Force to examine their promotion practices. Human officers previously overlooked for senior positions were now being fast-tracked based on merit rather than species preference. Commander In-Su had just been named the first human captain of a consortium capital ship, the massive Dreadnought Unity's Promise. His crew of mixed species had achieved the highest efficiency ratings in fleet history, proving that diversity strengthened rather than weakened military effectiveness. Back in the council chambers, the final votes were being tallied. The results appeared on screens throughout the galaxy as billions of beings watched history being made. "The motion passes," announced Council President Veltar, her crystalline voice ringing with authority. "The Human Equality Act is hereby adopted into consortium law by a vote of 847 in favor, 23 against, and 12 abstentions." The chamber erupted in cheers, clicks, chirps, and various other expressions of joy from hundreds of species. G1 smiled as she watched former enemies celebrating together, their differences forgotten in the moment of shared achievement. On Station Beta 7, now renamed Harmony Station in G1's honor, Captain Minho watched the broadcast with his diverse crew. The station had become a symbol of positive change, hosting the galaxy's first interspecies cultural exchange center. Beings from across the galaxy came to learn about each other's customs, art, and ways of life. The old courthouse where the infamous trial had taken place was now a museum dedicated to civil rights and equality. Visitors could see the exact spot where prejudice had been challenged and transformed into progress. Judge Kang Ho, watching from the council gallery, felt a mixture of shame and pride. His mistake had nearly destroyed his career, but G1's wisdom had shown him a path to redemption. He now traveled the galaxy, giving speeches about unconscious bias and the importance of treating all beings with dignity. "You know," Dongwu said to him quietly as they watched the celebration, "she could have destroyed you completely. One word from the Harmony Singer and your career would have been over." Kang Ho nodded thoughtfully. "That's what makes humans so remarkable. Where my species might have sought revenge, she chose to seek understanding. Where others might have used their power to punish, she used hers to heal." As the celebration continued, G1 stepped away from the podium and moved through the crowd, personally thanking delegates from each species. Her simple presence seemed to bring out the best in everyone around her. The Beta 7 incident had started as a moment of ignorance and prejudice, but it had become something far greater, proof that even the darkest moments could be transformed into light when people chose hope over hatred, understanding over anger and progress over revenge. Later that evening, as the delegates dispersed to their home worlds to implement the new laws, Ji-won stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was still vast and full of challenges, but it was also full of hope. Dongwoo joined her at the viewport. "So, what's our next mission, Admiral?" She smiled, using the title she had earned through years of bringing peace to troubled worlds. There are still species out there who haven't learned to work together, still conflicts that need healing, still songs that need to be sung. Together they watched as ships from dozens of worlds departed the station, carrying the message of equality and understanding to every corner of the galaxy. The universe was changing, one heart and one mind at a time. The end.